I never imagined my life would change completely at the exact moment I was trying to convince a 3-pound Pinscher not to destroy an Italian leather sofa belonging to an arrogant millionaire. Napoleon, for God's sake, stop that, I whispered desperately to the small brown beast who was growling ferociously at the $15,000 piece of furniture as if it were her mortal enemy. But let's go back a few hours when everything started much less chaotically. My name is Beatrice Baya Hope Anderson. Yes, my parents had a peculiar sense of humor and unshakable faith in destiny. And until that Tuesday morning, I was just a 28-year-old veterinarian sharing a tiny apartment in Brooklyn with my grandmother Dorothy and her psychotic Pinscher. I was organizing patient files at the clinic when my phone rang with the theme music from The Godfather, a ringtone reserved exclusively for calls that usually brought trouble. Dr. Anderson? The male voice was deep, formal, and loaded with authority. This is William Alexander Blackwood. I need your veterinary services. Urgently. William Alexander Blackwood. Even a hermit living on top of a mountain would know that name. Heir to a real estate empire known for his legendary arrogance and for collecting ex-girlfriends like others collect stamps. Also famous for never accepting no as an answer. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. What's the problem with your pet? I don't have pets, he replied, as if the very idea was absurd. The problem is I need a wife, temporary, and you're going to help me with that. I blinked several times, sure I had heard wrong. I'm sorry, but I think you dialed the wrong number. I'm a veterinarian, not a matchmaking agency. Dr. Anderson, I'll be direct because I don't have time to waste. My grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, is dying. She has one last wish, to see me married and settled before she passes. Since I don't intend to get married for real anytime soon, I need someone to pretend to be my wife for 3 months until she rests in peace. The coldness with which he spoke about his own grandmother's death made me frown. And why exactly do you think I would accept such a crazy proposal? Because I researched you, Dr. Anderson. I know your clinic is having financial difficulties, that you have 2 weeks to pay overdue rent or you'll be evicted. I also know your grandmother needs expensive heart surgery and you don't have insurance that covers the procedure. My blood ran cold. How did he know all this? In exchange for your temporary wife services, he continued, I'll pay all your debts, cover your grandmother's surgery, and give you $200,000 to restart your life wherever you want after the 3 months. $200,000. It was more money than I would see in 5 years working at the clinic. There's a catch, he added, and I could almost hear the cynical smile in his voice. My grandmother is very traditional. She'll want to meet your family. Since you only have grandmother Dorothy, you'll have to bring her to live with us during these 3 months. That's fine. Grandma Dorothy is easygoing, I murmured, mentally calculating how that money could change our lives. And the Pinscher, too. What do you mean? Napoleon. I researched everything, remember? I know your grandmother is attached to the dog and would never agree to be separated from her. So for 3 months, my 7,000-square-foot mansion will be home to 2 grandmothers and 1 crazy Pinscher. I remained silent, processing the madness of that proposal. Dr. Anderson, I need an answer in 2 hours. My grandmother arrives from her trip this afternoon and I'll announce our engagement at dinner. Wait, we don't even know each other properly. We'll get to know each other during lunch. Noon, Le Bernardin. Wear something elegant. And the call ended. I stared at the phone as if it had just bitten me. That man's audacity was impressive. Who did he think he was to? Bea, honey, who was that? Grandma Dorothy appeared at the clinic door, Napoleon in her arms, both watching me curiously. I looked at my 82-year-old grandmother, who raised 5 children alone, worked her whole life as a seamstress, and never asked anyone for anything. Her light blue eyes had been dimmer lately, and I knew she was trying to hide from me how much the chest pains were getting worse. Grandma, I began slowly, how would you feel about a temporary change? 2 hours later, I was standing in front of Le Bernardin, wearing the only dress I owned, a basic black one I used for graduations and funerals, trying to gather courage to enter. I took a deep breath and walked through the door. William Alexander Blackwood was sitting at the back table on his phone. When he saw me, he stood up, and for the first time I could see in person the man who was about to turn my life upside down. He was about 6'2", with brown hair always perfectly styled, green eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around as if calculating the monetary value of each thing. The charcoal gray suit probably cost more than my car. "Dr. Anderson," he said, extending his hand. "Punctuality. I like that." When our fingers touched, I felt a strange electric shock, but his expression remained impassive. "Mr. Blackwood," I replied, trying to sound professional. He pulled out my chair, and as I sat down, I could smell his expensive cologne, something between sandalwood and arrogance, I thought ironically. "Let's get straight to the point," he said, sitting across from me. 3 months, fake marriage, $200,000. Deal? I still haven't heard the details of this charade. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those penetrating green eyes. "It's simple. You'll be my devoted and loving wife in front of my grandmother and anyone who asks. You'll live in my house, attend some social events with me, and basically play the role of the woman who made me want to settle down. And what do I get besides the money?" "Survival," he replied with brutal honesty. "Your clinic closes in 2 weeks if you don't pay rent. Your grandmother needs that surgery. I don't see many other options on your horizon, Dr. Anderson." I hated to admit it, but he was right. "And the rules of cohabitation?" "You'll have your own suite, obviously. I'm not a savage. Your grandmother and the Pinscher will stay in the east wing of the house. As for the rest, we'll improvise as needed." "There won't be any intimacy, correct?" For the first time, he showed a smile, and it was irritatingly charming. "Dr. Anderson, I can assure you I won't have any difficulty keeping my hands off you." That man's arrogance was infuriating. "So is it a deal?" he insisted. I thought about Grandma Dorothy, the accumulated bills, the dreams I had of expanding the clinic. "One last question," I said. "Why me? Surely there are women more suitable to your world." "Exactly because of that. You're ordinary, simple, without social ambitions. Perfect for convincing my grandmother that I fell in love with someone authentic, who made me want to change my life. Plus, you're a veterinarian. There's something poetically ironic about a person who takes care of animals also taking care of my heart of stone, don't you think?" I clenched my fists. How could he be so arrogant and offensive in a single sentence? "I accept," I said, surprising us both. "Great. The driver will pick you up at 5. Bring only the essentials." He stood up, threw some bills on the table, and started to leave. "Oh, and Dr. Anderson?" "Yes?" "Welcome to the Blackwood family. Try not to ruin my reputation." And that's how, a few hours later, I found myself in the entrance hall of a mansion that looked like it came out of a magazine, holding the leash of a hysterical Pinscher, while my grandmother admired a crystal chandelier that was probably worth more than our entire house. "Bea, dear," whispered Grandma Dorothy. "Are you sure about this?" Before I could answer, William appeared at the top of the marble staircase, dressed casually, jeans and white shirt, but still imposing. "My dear borrowed family," he announced, coming down the stairs with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My grandmother arrives in an hour. I hope you're ready for the performance of your lives." Napoleon let out a shrill bark and tried to attack his foot. "Perfect," William murmured, dodging the little beast. "This is going to be more complicated than I imagined." And it was at that moment I realized I had just entered the craziest roller coaster of my life. And it was just beginning. If someone had told me that within 24 hours I'd be sitting in a dining room that could house my entire apartment, pretending to be madly in love with a man who spoke to me like I was a business transaction, I would have recommended therapy. Yet here I was, watching Napoleon systematically terrorize a house that probably appeared in Architectural Digest. "Your dog," William said through gritted teeth as Napoleon attempted to mark territory on a Ming vase, "seems to have declared war on my home." "She's selective about her enemies," I replied sweetly, pulling Napoleon away from what was probably a priceless antique. "She has excellent instincts about character." His green eyes flashed with something between annoyance and amusement. "Charming. My grandmother will be here any moment, and your excellent judge of character just tried to attack my Persian rug. Maybe she's protesting the ridiculous luxury, I shot back, then immediately regretted it when his expression darkened. Before he could respond, the massive front door opened with a flourish that would make a Broadway entrance jealous. A tiny woman with silver hair perfectly coiffed and eyes identical to William's stepped inside, followed by two men carrying enough luggage for a small army. "William, darling." Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd never been denied anything in her 80-something years. "I hope you have wonderful news for your old grandmother." Eleanor Blackwood was exactly what I'd imagined. Elegant, sharp-eyed, and completely terrifying in the way only wealthy matriarchs could be. William straightened, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost nervous. "Grandmother, I do indeed." He walked over to me and, without warning, slipped his arm around my waist. The touch sent an unwelcome jolt through my system. "I'd like you to meet Beatrice Anderson, my fiancée." The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Eleanor's gaze moved from William to me, then down to Napoleon, who chose that exact moment to growl at the chandelier above us. "Your fiancé," Eleanor repeated slowly as if testing foreign words. "How unexpected." "Unexpected but wonderful," I managed, forcing my brightest smile while trying to ignore how natural William's arm felt around me. "I'm so honored to finally meet you, Mrs. Blackwood." "It's fascinating," Eleanor continued, circling us like an elegant predator. "In all my years, William has never mentioned anyone named Beatrice. In fact, just last month he told me he was too focused on business for romantic entanglements." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Tell me, dear, how did you manage to capture my grandson's famously commitment-phobic heart?" I felt William tense beside me. This was it. Our first test. "Well," I began, channeling every romantic movie I'd ever seen. "It was actually Napoleon who brought us together." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Napoleon?" "My Pinscher." I gestured to the tiny dog who was now staring intensely at a crystal vase. "William brought his cat to my clinic." "I don't have a cat," William said quickly. "You did," I corrected, patting his chest affectionately. "Poor Whiskers had a terrible case of ear mites. You were so worried about her." Eleanor's eyes lit up with genuine interest. William was worried about a cat? My William, who once called animals unnecessary complications? He was beside himself, I continued, warming to the story. Kept calling every hour for updates. That's when I realized there was more to him than the cold businessman facade. "Fascinating," Eleanor murmured, but her tone suggested she was buying it. "And the proposal? How did my romantically challenged grandson manage that?" William's arm tightened around me, and I could practically hear his brain scrambling for an answer. Time for me to save us both. "Oh, it was so romantic," I sighed dreamily. "He brought Napoleon. He came to pick up Whiskers, and Napoleon immediately fell in love with him. You know how Pinchers are with their instincts about people." As if on cue, Napoleon barked and attempted to climb William's leg. He looked down at her in horror. "She's very affectionate," Eleanor noted dryly. And William just looked at me and said, "If your dog approves of me, maybe I have a chance at winning your heart too." I gazed up at William with what I hoped looked like adoration. How could I resist? "How indeed," Eleanor said, but she was smiling now. "Well, this calls for a celebration. I'll have Margaret prepare dinner. We must get to know each other properly." As Eleanor bustled away calling for the housekeeper, William's arm dropped from around me like I'd burned him. "Whiskers?" he hissed under his breath. "A cat named Whiskers?" It was the first name that came to mind. "At least I saved your reputation as a heartless businessman. By making me a crazy cat person instead?" "You're welcome," I said primly, then looked down to find Napoleon missing. Oh no. Where did she go? We found her in Eleanor's sitting room, having somehow managed to pull down a silk curtain and get tangled in it while Grandma Dorothy tried unsuccessfully to extract her. "I'm so sorry," Dorothy was saying to Eleanor, who was watching the chaos with apparent fascination. She gets excited in new places. Nonsense. Eleanor laughed, actually laughed. It's wonderful to have some life in this mausoleum. William, your house has been far too quiet. Quiet is good, William muttered, helping me untangle Napoleon from about 50 yards of imported silk. Quiet is boring, Eleanor countered. Beatrice, tell me about yourself. What do you do besides tame my grandson? I'm a veterinarian, I said, finally freeing Napoleon, who immediately began investigating Eleanor's shoes. I run a small clinic in Brooklyn. How refreshing. A woman with a real profession. And your family? Just Grandma Dorothy and me. And Napoleon, of course. Eleanor's expression softened. And your grandmother raised you? Since I was 12, I nodded. My parents died in a car accident. The lie came so easily I almost believed it myself. In reality, my parents were very much alive and living in Oregon, but something about Eleanor's kindly expression made me want to create a story that would make her care about us. How tragic, and how wonderful that you had each other. Eleanor reached over and squeezed Dorothy's hand. Strong women raising strong women, I admire that. William was watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. Dinner is served, announced Margaret, the housekeeper. The dining room table could have seated 20, but it felt cozy with just the 4 of us. 5 if you counted Napoleon, who had somehow convinced Eleanor to let her sit on a silk cushion beside her chair. So, William, Eleanor said, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon, when's the wedding? William choked on his wine. Wedding? You are engaged, aren't you? Unless this is some modern arrangement I'm not understanding. I jumped in before William could answer. We're still planning. Everything happened so fast, didn't it, honey? Blazingly fast, William agreed, his voice strained. Well, don't wait too long, Eleanor advised. At my age, one never knows how much time is left. I'd love to dance at your wedding. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. This sweet woman was dying, and we were lying to her about something that would bring her joy in her final months. We won't wait long, I heard myself saying. Will we, William? His eyes met mine across the table, and for a moment I saw something vulnerable there, something that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. No, he said quietly. We won't wait long at all. Eleanor beamed, and Dorothy smiled tearfully, and Napoleon barked at the chandelier again, and I realized that somewhere in the space of a few hours, this ridiculous charade had started to feel dangerously real. And that terrified me more than any amount of William's arrogance ever could. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of World War III happening somewhere in the mansion. Specifically, Napoleon had discovered that barking at her own reflection in the marble floors created the most spectacular echo, and she was testing this acoustic phenomenon with scientific dedication. Napoleon, for the love of... I stumbled out of my ridiculously luxurious suite, still in my pajamas, and nearly collided with William, who was standing in the hallway looking like he'd wrestled with his perfectly styled hair and lost. Your dog, he said, his voice dangerously calm, has been conducting what I can only assume is psychological warfare since 5:30 a.m. She's adjusting, I defended, though Napoleon chose that moment to launch into a particularly aggressive barking fit at a bronze sculpture of what appeared to be a very dignified horse. She's terrorizing my household staff. Margaret asked if we needed an exorcist. Before I could respond, Eleanor's voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. William, darling, is everything all right? It sounds like we have a very small but very angry wolf loose. Everything's perfect, grandmother, William called back, then grabbed my elbow and steered me toward the kitchen. We need to talk, now. The kitchen was a monument to culinary excess, marble counters, professional-grade appliances, and enough space to cater a small wedding. Margaret was standing at the stove, looking frazzled while Napoleon circled her feet like a tiny, furry shark. Coffee, William commanded, and Margaret practically sprinted to comply. Good morning to you too, sunshine, I muttered, scooping up Napoleon, who immediately began trying to lick my face with the enthusiasm of someone who'd discovered caffeine. We have a problem, William said, accepting his coffee like it was a lifeline. My grandmother called my mother. I blinked. Okay? My mother is flying in from the Hamptons today. She wants to meet the wonderful girl who finally tamed William's heart. He made air quotes with such disgust you'd think he was discussing a plague outbreak. So, another grandmother-type person? How hard can it be? William's laugh was devoid of humor. You clearly haven't met Victoria Blackwood. My mother makes Eleanor look like a kindergarten teacher. She has a PhD in spotting fake relationships from Harvard Business School, and she's destroyed more gold diggers than the stock market crash of 1929. My stomach dropped. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that if my mother suspects for even a second that this engagement is fake, she'll have you investigated so thoroughly they'll know what you had for breakfast in 3rd grade, and then she'll destroy you for sport. Napoleon wiggled out of my arms and immediately began investigating the fascinating scents around Margaret's ankles. The poor woman looked like she was trying to cook while being audited by a very small, very persistent health inspector. William, maybe we should just tell Eleanor the truth, I suggested quietly. This is getting too complicated. His expression hardened. Absolutely not. My grandmother is happier than I've seen her in years. I won't take that away from her. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Besides, the doctors said she has maybe 2 months. We can manage this charade for 2 months. 2 months. The reminder of Eleanor's mortality hit me like a cold wave. Then what do we do about your mother? We practice. We need to know each other well enough to convince someone who's made a career out of being suspicious. He set down his coffee cup with the determination of a general planning a military campaign. Tell me everything about yourself. Real facts, not the stories we made up for Eleanor. Here. Now. Here. Now. Margaret, could you please ensure we're not disturbed, and perhaps contain the dog? Margaret looked at Napoleon, who had somehow managed to get her head stuck in a copper pot. I'll do my best, sir. William led me to a small breakfast nook overlooking the garden. In the morning light, with his hair slightly mussed and his usual armor of perfect composure cracked, he looked almost human. Start with the basics, he instructed. Real name, real family, real life. Beatrice Hope Anderson. Parents are actually alive and well in Portland. They're both accountants. Boring but stable. I have one sister, Emma, who's a teacher in Seattle. I went to Cornell for veterinary medicine, graduated with honors but massive student loans. I opened the clinic 3 years ago with my inheritance from my grandfather. I paused. Your turn. He was quiet for a moment as if he'd forgotten this was supposed to be reciprocal. William Alexander Blackwood. Parents divorced when I was 12. Father remarried twice. Currently living in Monaco with wife number 3. Mother never remarried. Channeled all her energy into making sure I became the perfect heir to the Blackwood empire. His voice was carefully neutral. Harvard Business MBA at 24, took over the company at 28 when my father decided sailing was more important than real estate. Must have been hard growing up in all this. I gestured around the opulent kitchen. Hard? He looked genuinely puzzled. I had everything anyone could want. Except parents who were present. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. I had nannies, excellent ones. Not the same thing. Before he could respond, Napoleon came barreling into the breakfast nook, having somehow escaped both the copper pot and Margaret's supervision. She leaped onto William's lap with the confidence of a dog who'd clearly never heard the word no. Napoleon, down, I commanded, but she was too busy trying to steal William's toast. It's fine, he said, and to my amazement, he actually petted her. She's persistent. That's one word for it. I watched fascinated as Napoleon settled contentedly on his lap. She likes you. The feeling is mutual, he admitted, then looked up at me with surprise, as if he hadn't meant to say that out loud. William, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why did you really choose me? And don't say it's because I'm ordinary and convenient. There had to be dozens of women who would have jumped at this opportunity. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Because when I walked into your clinic to research you, you were singing to a terrified rescue puppy while giving him vaccines. You didn't know anyone was watching, and you were completely unconscious of yourself. You just cared. Genuinely. He looked down at Napoleon, who had fallen asleep on his lap. I realized I'd never seen anyone care about anything the way you cared about that scared little dog. My heart did something acrobatic in my chest. William. Dr. Anderson, Mr. Blackwood. Margaret's voice carried a note of panic as she rushed into the breakfast nook. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood has just arrived. She's in the foyer with enough luggage for a month. William's face went pale. She wasn't supposed to be here until tonight. She said, and I quote, I couldn't wait another moment to meet the miracle worker who made my son believe in love. Margaret looked apologetic. She's asking for both of you immediately. I looked down at my pajamas, flannel with cartoon cats, and then at William's disheveled hair and rumpled shirt. We looked like anything but a couple ready to fool a woman with a PhD in suspicion. We're dead, I whispered. Not yet, William said grimly, gently transferring Napoleon to my arms and standing up. But we're about to be. From the foyer came the sound of an imperious voice giving orders to what sounded like a small army of assistants, followed by Eleanor's delighted laughter as she greeted her daughter-in-law. Showtime, William muttered. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely nervous. I grabbed his hand without thinking. Hey, we've got this. We fooled Eleanor, didn't we? His fingers squeezed mine, and for a moment standing there in our pajamas with a sleeping Pinscher between us, it felt less like acting and more like something real. Let's go meet your mother, I said. His smile was small but genuine. God help us both. Victoria Blackwood was exactly what would happen if you crossed Anna Winter with a military general and gave the result unlimited financial resources. Standing in the marble foyer wearing a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than my annual income, she surveyed the mansion like a queen returning to reclaim her territory. William, darling, she purred, air-kissing him with the precision of someone who'd perfected the art of affection without actual warmth. You look domestic. Her sharp blue eyes, so much colder than Eleanor's, swept over my flannel pajamas with the kind of assessment usually reserved for crime scenes. And you must be Beatrice, she continued, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. How refreshing. I don't think I've ever seen anyone greet a future mother-in-law in sleepwear featuring cartoon cats. I started, but Napoleon chose that moment to wake up and immediately fixate on Victoria's stilettos like they were personal enemies that had wronged her ancestors. Mother, William interrupted smoothly, stepping slightly in front of me. You're early. We weren't expecting you until tonight. Darling, when my son calls to announce his sudden engagement to a woman I've never heard of, I hardly think it's appropriate to wait for convenient timing. Victoria's gaze never left my face. Besides, I find that unexpected arrivals reveal so much more about people's true nature, don't you think, Beatrice? Napoleon let out a warning growl at Victoria's shoes, and I swear the woman actually stepped back. Napoleon, no, I said firmly, tightening my grip on the increasingly agitated Pinscher. Napoleon? Victoria's eyebrow arched to impressive heights. How historical and territorial, I see. She's protective, I explained lamely. Indeed. Of what exactly? The question felt loaded with implications I couldn't quite grasp. Eleanor chose that moment to glide into the foyer, completely oblivious to the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria, dear, isn't this wonderful? William has finally brought home the perfect girl. Perfect, Victoria repeated, still studying me like I was a particularly confusing art installation. Yes, I'm quite eager to learn more about this perfection. Why don't we all sit down for coffee? Eleanor suggested brightly. Beatrice, dear, perhaps you'd like to change into something more presentable? I felt my cheeks burn. Of course. Actually, Victoria interrupted with predatory sweetness, I think this is delightful. So authentic. Please don't change on my account. Her smile could have powered a small city. I'd love to hear all about how you two met. The real story, not whatever sanitized version you gave Eleanor. William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We were in trouble. It's quite romantic, actually, I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel into my voice. I was having the worst day of my life when William walked into my clinic. Oh? Victoria settled into an antique chair like a cat preparing to toy with a mouse. Do tell. I just lost a patient, I continued, the lie building itself as I spoke. A sweet old golden retriever named Murphy. His owner was devastated, and honestly, so was I. I was crying in the supply closet when William brought in. I glanced at William desperately. Duchess, he supplied smoothly. My neighbor's Persian cat. Right, Duchess. And he took one look at me, red-eyed, covered in dog hair, completely falling apart, and instead of running away like any sensible person would, he asked if I was okay. Victoria's expression remained unreadable. How considerate. He sat with me for 2 hours while I explained how Murphy had been coming to the clinic since he was a puppy, how his owner was an elderly man with no family, how sometimes this job breaks your heart, but you do it anyway because someone has to care. I found myself getting lost in the story, making it real as I spoke, and William just listened. Really listened. Then he asked if I wanted to grab coffee and talk about something that wouldn't make me cry. And did you? Eleanor asked, completely enchanted. We talked until 3 a.m, William said quietly, and something in his voice made me look at him sharply. About everything except veterinary medicine. How lovely, Victoria said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. And when did you realize you were in love? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I felt William tense beside me. When she fell asleep on my shoulder in that 24-hour diner, William said without hesitation. She'd been talking about her dreams of expanding the clinic, helping more animals, and she just drifted off mid-sentence. She looked so peaceful, even after the terrible day she'd had. I realized I wanted to protect that peace forever. My heart stopped. The way he said it, looking directly at me with those green eyes, made it sound so real that for a moment I almost believed it myself. And you, Beatrice? Victoria pressed. When did you know? When he paid for Murphy's cremation, I said softly, the words coming from somewhere deep and honest. The owner couldn't afford it, and I was trying to figure out how to help without making him feel like charity. William just quietly handled it. No fanfare, no expectation of gratitude. He saw someone in pain and fixed it, just because he could. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying our faces with laser-sharp focus. Napoleon had finally settled down, though she kept one suspicious eye on the designer shoes. How wonderfully philanthropic, Victoria finally said. And tell me, dear, what do your parents think of this sudden engagement? My stomach dropped. We hadn't prepared for this. They're thrilled, I managed. They can't wait to meet William. Splendid. Then they'll be able to attend the engagement party. Engagement party? William and I said simultaneously. Victoria's smile was triumphant. Why, yes, darling. I've already spoken to the country club. This Saturday, 7 o'clock. Nothing too elaborate. Just 150 of our closest friends and family. She stood gracefully. I do hope your parents can make it on such short notice, Beatrice. It would be such a shame if they missed their daughter's introduction to New York society. I felt the blood drain from my face. My parents thought I was still working at the clinic in Brooklyn, living with Grandma Dorothy, and definitely not engaged to a billionaire. Mother, William said carefully, that's very generous, but perhaps we should discuss. Nonsense. Eleanor, don't you think it's time this family had something to celebrate? Victoria was already pulling out her phone. I'll have Marianne start making calls immediately. Eleanor clapped her hands together delightedly. Oh, how wonderful! A party! Napoleon chose that exact moment to break free from my arms and make a beeline for Victoria's left shoe, which she attacked with the ferocity of a tiny, furry Viking warrior. Napoleon! I lunged forward, but the damage was done. Victoria's perfect composure cracked as she tried to shake off 3 pounds of determined Pinscher. Your dog, Victoria said through gritted teeth as I finally rescued her foot, appears to have strong opinions about Louboutin. She has excellent taste. Grandma Dorothy's voice came from the stairway. Those shoes could feed a family for a month. Victoria's expression froze as she took in Dorothy's comfortable cardigan and sensible shoes. Another witness to add to her growing list of suspicions. And you must be Beatrice's grandmother, Victoria said with forced politeness. Dorothy Anderson, Grandma Dorothy said with a sweet smile that didn't quite hide the steel underneath. And you must be the one Napoleon's been growling about all morning. Dogs always know. If looks could kill, Grandma Dorothy would have been a small pile of ash on the marble floor. Well, Victoria said, her composure restored but her eyes calculating. This should be quite the interesting week. I'll be staying until after the party, of course, to help with preparations. As she swept from the room with her entourage of assistants, I sank into the nearest chair, Napoleon finally calm in my lap. We are so dead, I whispered. Not yet, William said grimly. But Saturday night, we'll either pull off the performance of our lives or Victoria will destroy us both. Eleanor beamed at us both. Oh, this is so exciting. My William is getting married. Grandma Dorothy caught my eye and raised an eyebrow that clearly said, What exactly have you gotten us into, young lady? I looked down at Napoleon, who was now peacefully sleeping, probably dreaming of conquering more designer footwear. 3 more days, I muttered. How hard can it be? William's laugh was completely devoid of humor. Famous last words. Absolutely not. I stared at the dress hanging in front of me like it had personally offended my ancestors. It was beautiful, sure, if you were the type of person who enjoyed wearing a month's rent draped in silk and diamonds. Beatrice, darling, the personal shopper Victoria had hired, purred, This Valentino is perfect for your skin tone. It costs $18,000, I whispered, checking the tag again in case I'd hallucinated a zero. For one dress, that I'll wear for one night. Welcome to my world, William muttered from the uncomfortable chair where he'd been trapped for the past 3 hours, watching me try on outfits that could fund a small country's infrastructure. Victoria had commandeered the entire top floor of Bergdorf Goodman for what she called emergency styling, claiming that my wardrobe was charmingly rustic but entirely inadequate for society introduction. She'd swept out an hour ago to handle party preparations, leaving William and me at the mercy of a team of stylists who treated my objections to 4-figure price tags like adorable quirks. The dress is non-negotiable, William said firmly. My mother will analyze every thread you're wearing. If you show up in something from Target, she'll know exactly what this is. I don't shop at Target, I protested. I shop at slightly nicer places than Target. His smile was almost fond. Bea, I've seen your closet. You own exactly 3 dresses and one of them has a visible stain that looks suspiciously like chocolate. It was a medical emergency, I defended. A Great Dane had eaten a box of chocolates and I had to... Focus, he interrupted, but he was definitely trying not to laugh. We need you to look like someone who belongs at a country club engagement party, not someone who wrestles sick animals for a living. The stylist returned with another option, a midnight blue gown that was somehow both elegant and not completely terrifying. This is more reasonable, I said, checking the tag. Only $4,000. What a bargain. Sarcasm noted, William said dryly. Try it on. 20 minutes later, I emerged from the dressing room feeling like an imposter playing dress-up. The dress fit perfectly, skimming my curves in a way that was sophisticated rather than revealing. But I kept tugging at the neckline nervously. William went very still when he saw me. Well? I asked, suddenly self-conscious under his intense stare. You look... He cleared his throat. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. The way he said it, quiet and almost surprised, made my cheeks burn. For a moment, the busy store faded away and it was just us, staring at each other across a few feet of expensive carpet. Sir? The stylist's voice broke the spell. What about jewelry? Right. Jewelry. William seemed to shake himself back to reality. She'll need something substantial. My mother will notice if she's under-accessorized. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse. I have something. I pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only valuable thing I owned, inherited from my mom's mother. William's expression softened. They're perfect. And for the engagement ring? The stylist prompted. William and I exchanged panicked looks. In all our preparation, we'd somehow forgotten the most obvious prop for our charade. We're having it resized, I said quickly. Resized? The stylist looked confused. But surely you have something temporary. Actually, William said, standing abruptly, we need to take care of that now. Excuse us. He practically dragged me out of Bergdorf's and onto Fifth Avenue, where the afternoon sun was doing its best to pretend it wasn't November. Please tell me you have a plan, I said as we walked rapidly toward what I assumed was some high-end jewelry store. I'm working on it, he muttered, pulling out his phone. Marcus, it's William. I need a favor, a big one. 10 minutes later, we were standing in the private office of Marcus Goldberg, apparently William's family jeweler, and a man who looked like he'd seen every possible drama that money could create. Let me understand this correctly, Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair. You need an engagement ring, for tonight, for a woman you've been engaged to for less than a week. It's complicated, William said. It always is with you Blackwoods. Marcus turned to me with kindly eyes. And you, my dear, are you sure you want to marry this one? He's been coming here since he was 12 and he's never brought a woman with him before. Never? I looked at William in surprise. Never, Marcus confirmed, which is either very romantic or very suspicious depending on your perspective. Definitely suspicious, I muttered. Marcus laughed. I like her already. William, you found yourself a smart one. Can we focus on the ring? William asked impatiently. Of course. Now for a Blackwood engagement, we're talking about something significant. Family heirloom quality. Marcus moved to a safe behind his desk. I have a few pieces that might work. He returned with a tray of rings that probably cost more than most people's houses. My eyes immediately went to a simple but stunning solitaire. Classic, elegant, not too flashy. That one, I said, pointing. Excellent choice, Marcus beamed. Classic Tiffany setting, 3 carats, excellent clarity. It was originally made for... We'll take it, William interrupted, pulling out his credit card. Don't you want to know the price? I asked. No, William and Marcus said simultaneously. As Marcus sized the ring, I wandered around the showroom, trying not to think about the fact that I was about to wear a diamond worth more than I'd make in several years. Bia. William's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Are you okay with all this? The dress, the ring, the party? I know it's not what you signed up for. I turned to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Honestly, I'm terrified. Your mother is going to see right through us. Maybe not, he said, moving closer. We've gotten better at this. More natural. He was right. Somewhere between Napoleon's assault on Victoria's shoes and our morning coffee ritual, we'd started acting less like strangers playing roles and more like something else. Ready, Marcus announced cheerfully, holding up the ring. Shall I do the honors, or would you prefer to practice? Practice, William said firmly. We need to make this look genuine. My heart started racing as William took the ring box from Marcus and dropped to one knee right there in the jewelry store. Even though I knew it was fake, even though Marcus was clearly in on it, the sight of William kneeling in front of me with a ring box made my breath catch. Beatrice Hope Anderson, he said, his voice low and serious. Will you marry me? For a split second, looking into his green eyes, I forgot this was pretend. The way he was looking at me, the careful way he spoke my full name, the slight tremor in his hands as he opened the box, it all felt impossibly real. Yes, I whispered, and my voice was shakier than it should have been. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. When he stood up, we were standing so close I could see the gold flecks in his eyes. Beautiful, Marcus said approvingly. You two are very convincing. Too convincing, I thought, as William's thumb brushed over my knuckles where the ring sat. Way too convincing. We should go, William said, but he didn't move away from me. Napoleon is probably holding the household hostage by now. Right. Napoleon. I looked down at the ring, sparkling on my finger like a promise I had no right to make. William? Yeah? What happens after? After the 3 months, after Eleanor? I couldn't finish the sentence. His expression closed off slightly. We go back to our regular lives. You take your money and rebuild your clinic wherever you want. I go back to being the heartless businessman who learned to love and lost it. And the ring? Yours, he said firmly. Consider it a bonus for exceptional performance. I nodded, trying to ignore the strange ache in my chest. Okay. Partners in crime for 3 more months. Partners in crime, he agreed. But something in his eyes suggested he was thinking the same thing I was, that this felt less like a crime and more like the most dangerous kind of truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Dinner at 7. Wear something appropriate. We have much to discuss before tomorrow. I showed William the message, and he groaned. More interrogation? I sighed. More lies, he corrected grimly. As we left Marcus's shop, my new ring catching the afternoon light, I couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest lie we were telling was to ourselves. If hell had a dress code, it would be black tie optional at the Westchester Country Club. I stood in front of the floor-length mirror in my suite, wearing $4,000 worth of midnight blue silk and feeling like a fraud in designer clothing. The ring on my finger caught the light every time I moved, a constant reminder of the performance I was about to give. A soft knock interrupted my nervous fidgeting. Come in. William entered, and I forgot how to breathe. He wore his tuxedo like he'd been born in it, which, knowing his background, he probably had. The black fabric emphasized his broad shoulders, and his bow tie was perfectly straight. But what stopped my heart was the expression on his face when he saw me. You're staring, I said softly. So are you, he replied, his voice rough around the edges. We stood there for a moment, drinking each other in, before reality crashed back. Are you ready for this? He asked, adjusting his cufflinks with the kind of nervous energy I'd never seen from him before. Define ready, I muttered, smoothing my dress for the 100th time. I've memorized our fake story, practiced looking lovingly into your eyes without laughing, and mentally prepared myself to survive your mother's interrogation. But ready? That's debatable. He moved closer, and suddenly we were standing in that dangerous space where I could smell his cologne and count his eyelashes. Bia, there's something I need to tell you before we go down there. My stomach clenched. Oh God, what now? My ex-fiancé is going to be there. You're what? I practically shrieked, then forced my voice lower. You were engaged before? Briefly, 2 years ago. Anastasia Worthington, old family friend, perfect society match. Everything my mother ever wanted for me. His jaw tightened. The engagement lasted exactly 6 weeks before I realized I'd rather be alone forever than spend my life pretending to love someone. And your mother invited her tonight because Victoria loves chaos and probably wants to see how you handle the competition. I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling sick. Great. So I get to pretend to be madly in love with you while your perfect ex-fiancé watches and your mother analyzes my every move. This night just keeps getting better. William sat beside me, close enough that our knees touched. Hey, look at me. I reluctantly met his eyes. Anastasia is everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, accomplished, socially acceptable. But she's also cold, calculating, and cares more about the Blackwood name than the actual person attached to it. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. You're real, Bia. Whatever else this is between us, you're the most real thing that's happened to me in years. My heart did that acrobatic thing again. William, I know this is just a job for you, he continued quickly. But tonight, when you're up there pretending to love me, just remember that every single person in that room would kill to have what you have. Someone who sees past the money and the name to the actual person underneath. Before I could process what he'd just said, Eleanor's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Children, our guests are arriving." "Showtime," William murmured, standing and offering me his arm. "Wait." I grabbed his sleeve. "What about Napoleon? We can't leave her alone up here. She'll destroy something priceless." "Already handled. Dorothy is keeping her in the kitchen with Margaret. Apparently they've bonded over their mutual disapproval of pretentious dinner parties." The country club looked like something out of a fairy tale, if fairy tales included crystal chandeliers worth more than houses and flower arrangements that could fund small businesses. Guests in designer everything mingled on the terrace, champagne flutes catching the light of 100 twinkling bulbs. "Breathe," William murmured in my ear as we made our entrance. "I am breathing," I whispered back. "No, you're hyperventilating. Smile. Look happy to be here." I forced my best smile and immediately spotted Victoria holding court near the bar, surrounded by women who looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. And beside her, "Let me guess," I said under my breath. "Tall blonde, looks like she's never had an impure thought or eaten carbohydrates." "That's Anastasia," William confirmed grimly. She was stunning in the way that only came from excellent genetics and unlimited access to the best of everything. Her silver dress probably cost more than my car, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "William," she practically purred, gliding over to us with the grace of a professional dancer. "How wonderful to see you." She air-kissed him with practiced ease, then turned those perfect blue eyes to me with a smile that could have powered a nuclear reactor. "And you must be Beatrice. I'm Anastasia Worthington. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I managed, accepting her perfectly manicured hand. "Oh, absolutely. Victoria has been telling everyone about William's little veterinarian." The way she said little veterinarian made it sound like I cleaned kennels for a living. How refreshing that he's found someone so different. William's arm tightened around my waist. Different is exactly what I was looking for. "Well, of course," Anastasia laughed, a sound like expensive wind chimes. "After all, variety is the spice of life, isn't it? Though I must say, Beatrice, you're handling the spotlight remarkably well for someone so new to all this." The backhanded compliment hit its mark, but before I could respond, Victoria materialized beside us with the timing of a woman who'd been eavesdropping. "Darling." She air-kissed me with about as much warmth as a refrigerator. "You look lovely. That dress is quite suitable." Suitable. Like I was furniture. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. You look stunning as well." "Please call me Victoria. After all, we're practically family now." Her smile could have cut diamonds. "Anastasia, dear, I was just telling the Pembertons about your new gallery opening. So exciting." "Oh, it's nothing, really," Anastasia said with false modesty. "Just a little contemporary art space in Soho, though the Times did give us a lovely review." "How wonderful," I said, trying to sound impressed rather than intimidated. "What kind of art do you focus on?" "Emerging artists, mostly. People who haven't been discovered by the mainstream yet." She paused delicately. "I imagine that's something you can relate to, being discovered by William, I mean." The claws were definitely out now. "Actually," William interjected smoothly, "Bea discovered me. I was the one who walked into her clinic, remember? With a sick cat," I added, grateful for his support. "He was so worried about Duchess." "Duchess?" Anastasia's perfect eyebrows rose. "William, since when do you have a cat? You always said pets were too much responsibility." Shit. We'd forgotten Anastasia actually knew William. "People change," William said easily, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Meeting Bea changed my perspective on a lot of things." "How romantic," Victoria said dryly. "Speaking of which, I believe it's time for a toast." The next 20 minutes were a blur of champagne, polite applause, and the most nerve-wracking speech of my life. William's toast was perfect, funny, romantic, and just embarrassing enough to be believable. When he talked about falling in love with my fierce compassion and terrible morning hair, even I almost believed it. But it was during the dinner that disaster struck. I was in the middle of a conversation with Eleanor about wedding flowers when my phone buzzed with an emergency text from Dorothy. Napoleon got into the champagne. She's drunk, very drunk, and she's escaped. "Excuse me," I said to the table, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just need to powder my nose." I found William by the bar and discreetly showed him the message. "How does a 3-pound dog get drunk?" he asked incredulously. Apparently, Margaret left a glass of champagne on the counter while she was cooking. Napoleon has excellent jumping skills when motivated. And now she's loose in a country club full of people wearing clothes worth more than cars. Pretty much. We looked at each other for a moment, then burst into simultaneous action. "I'll check the dining room," William said. "I'll take the kitchen and—" "William, Beatrice!" Victoria's voice cut across the terrace like a sword. "Where are you going?" Anastasia was just about to share her thoughts on the engagement. "Coming," I called back sweetly, then whispered to William, "Find that dog before she destroys everything." 20 minutes later, I was trapped at our table listening to Anastasia detail her opinions on appropriate engagement timelines when a commotion erupted near the bar. "What on earth?" Victoria started to say, then stopped as Napoleon came barreling across the terrace, clearly intoxicated and wearing what appeared to be a napkin like a cape. She made a beeline for the dessert table, launching herself at a 3-tiered cake with the enthusiasm of a tiny drunk acrobat. The cake never stood a chance. As chaos erupted around us, guests shrieking, staff running, and Napoleon barking triumphantly from atop the ruins of what had been a masterpiece of confectionery art, I caught William's eye across the terrace. He was trying not to laugh. So was I. And for the first time all evening, this ridiculous charade felt less like acting and more like the kind of disaster you could only survive with someone you really, truly trusted. I woke up to Napoleon snoring like a tiny chainsaw on the pillow next to my head, still wearing the napkin cape she'd somehow managed to keep on during her drunken rampage. The events of the previous night came flooding back: the cake destruction, Victoria's horrified expression, and the way William and I had dissolved into hysterical laughter while everyone else panicked. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various society reporters and a text from William. "Emergency family meeting. Main dining room, 10 a.m. Bring Napoleon if she's still alive." Napoleon opened one bloodshot eye and immediately closed it again with a pitiful whimper. "Rough night, girl?" I scratched behind her ears. "Welcome to your first hangover." An hour later, I descended to what could only be described as a war council. William sat at the massive dining table looking like he'd slept about as well as I had, while Victoria paced back and forth like a caged tiger. Eleanor was conspicuously absent. "Grandmother is having breakfast in bed," William explained when he saw me looking around. "She found the whole thing delightfully entertaining and has already started planning stories to tell her bridge club." "At least someone enjoyed themselves," Victoria said icily, finally stopping her pacing to fix me with a stare that could have frozen hell. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "What I've done?" I set Napoleon down carefully, and she immediately found a sunny spot on the Persian rug to collapse dramatically. "I didn't force-feed champagne to a 3-pound dog." "Your dog," Victoria continued as if I hadn't spoken, "destroyed a $5,000 cake, traumatized the Pemberton's poodle, and caused a scene that will be discussed in society circles for months." "And yet," William said mildly, "half the guests thought it was the most entertaining party they'd attended in years. I got at least 6 compliments on my refreshingly unpretentious fiancé." Victoria's expression could have curdled milk. "This isn't a joke, William." "Isn't it?" He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely relaxed. "Mother, you've spent years complaining that my life was too rigid, too controlled. Last night was the most spontaneous fun I've had in decades." "Fun?" Victoria's voice climbed an octave. "The society pages are calling it the Great Pinscher Incident of 2024. The Chronicle wants an exclusive interview." "Then we give them one," I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. "We tell them the truth, that Napoleon got into some champagne, had a little too much fun, and proved that even the fanciest parties need a little chaos sometimes." Victoria stared at me like I'd suggested we burn down the country club. You want to encourage this narrative? Why not? William stood up and moved to stand beside my chair, his hand finding my shoulder in a gesture that felt automatic now. Bia's right. We spin it as charming, quirky, proof that love makes you embrace the unexpected. The Worthingtons have already called to express their concern about your choice of companion, Victoria said coldly. Let them be concerned, William replied. Anastasia never brought anything unexpected to my life except boredom. The kitchen door swung open, and Dorothy entered carrying a tray of coffee and what appeared to be a hangover remedy for Napoleon, a small bowl of bland rice and chicken. Good morning, everyone, she said cheerfully, setting the tray down. I thought our little party animal might need some recovery food. Napoleon lifted her head hopefully at the smell, then thought better of it and put her head back down. Mrs. Anderson, Victoria said with forced politeness, I hope you understand that last night's incident was highly irregular. Oh, honey, Dorothy laughed, settling into a chair like she owned the place. I've raised 5 children and survived the Great Blizzard of '78. One drunk dog at a fancy party barely registers on my chaos scale. I had to bite my lip to keep from grinning at Victoria's expression. Besides, Dorothy continued, spooning some rice into a small dish for Napoleon, I think it was rather sweet how you two handled it, like a real team. William's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder, and I felt that dangerous flutter in my chest again. A real team, Victoria repeated slowly, and I didn't like the calculating look in her eyes. How interesting. Tell me, Beatrice, what's your plan for after the wedding? After the wedding? I repeated carefully. Your career, dear. Surely you don't intend to continue working in that little clinic in Brooklyn once you're a Blackwood wife. I felt William tense beside me. We hadn't discussed this part of our fake future. Actually, I said, thinking fast, William and I have been talking about expanding the clinic, maybe opening a second location, focusing on rescue animals and low-income pet owners. How charitable, Victoria said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And expensive. Such ventures require significant initial investment. Good thing I can afford it, William said firmly. I think it's a wonderful idea. That was news to me, but I tried to look like we'd discussed it extensively. Fascinating, Victoria murmured. You know, Beatrice, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday about your parents. My blood ran cold. What about them? Well, it's such a shame they couldn't make it last night. I do hope they'll be able to attend the wedding. Victoria's smile was predatory now. I've taken the liberty of having my assistant reach out to them directly. The room went deadly quiet except for Napoleon's pitiful groaning. You did what? William's voice was dangerously low. I simply thought it would be lovely to include them in the planning process. After all, the bride's family should have a say in their daughter's wedding. Victoria pulled out her phone. Let's see. I believe my assistant said she reached out to James and Linda Anderson in Portland, Oregon. My parents' actual names. My actual parents who thought I was still broke and single and definitely not engaged to a billionaire. Mother. William's voice carried a warning that would have made smart people back down. Victoria was not smart people. Don't worry, darling. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear about your engagement. My assistant left a message explaining everything and asking them to call back immediately to discuss wedding arrangements. I felt the blood drain from my face. When my parents called back, and they absolutely would call back immediately after receiving that message, our entire charade would crumble. How thoughtful, Dorothy said into the silence, her voice deceptively mild. Victoria, dear, may I ask you something? Of course. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Victoria's mask slipped slightly. I'm simply trying to ensure my son's happiness. By sabotaging his engagement? Dorothy's tone could have cut glass despite her sweet smile. Because that's what this looks like to me. A woman so determined to control her son's life that she'd rather destroy his happiness than let him choose it for himself. How dare you? I dare because I've watched my granddaughter fall in love with your son, Dorothy continued calmly. Real love. The kind that makes you laugh together even when everything's falling apart. And I've watched him discover what it feels like to be loved for who he is, not what he has. I stared at my grandmother in shock. When had she figured it out? And more importantly, what exactly had she figured out? Real love? Victoria laughed harshly. Dorothy, surely you can see this is all very sudden, very convenient. What I see, Dorothy interrupted, standing up with dignity that made Victoria's designer armor look cheap, is a young woman who's given your son something I haven't seen in him since he was a child. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She moved to stand behind William and me, her hands settling on both our shoulders like a blessing. And what I also see is a mother so afraid of losing control that she's willing to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to her son. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. William was staring at Dorothy like she'd performed a miracle, and I was trying to process the fact that my grandmother, who I thought didn't know about the fake engagement, had just defended our relationship with more conviction than I'd defended it myself. My phone rang, cutting through the tension. The caller ID made my stomach drop to my feet. Mom, aren't you going to answer that? Victoria asked sweetly. I looked at William, whose expression had gone from shocked to determined. He stood up, took my phone, and without hesitation, declined the call. Actually, Mother, he said calmly, I think it's time you went back to the Hamptons. Excuse me? You heard me. This is my house, my life, and my choice. Bia makes me happy in ways I didn't even know were possible, and if you can't accept that, then you're no longer welcome here. Victoria's face went through approximately 17 different shades of outrage. William Alexander Blackwood, you cannot be serious. Try me. For a moment I thought Victoria might actually explode. Instead, she drew herself up to her full height, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. This isn't over, she said coldly. Yes, William replied firmly. It is. After Victoria swept out like a designer hurricane, we sat in stunned silence. Napoleon finally lifted her head and let out a small, pathetic bark that somehow summed up exactly how we all felt. Well, Dorothy said cheerfully, settling back into her chair. That was fun. Now who wants to tell me what's really going on here? Dorothy's question hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Napoleon chose that moment to finally drag herself over to her recovery bowl, her tiny hangover apparently making her philosophical about rice and chicken. Grandma, I started, but she held up a hand. Before you say anything, let me tell you what I know. Dorothy settled into her chair with the authority of someone who'd been watching and waiting for this moment. I know that 3 weeks ago you were crying yourself to sleep about losing the clinic. I know that you've never mentioned anyone named William in your entire life, and I know that no one falls in love and gets engaged in the span of a week without there being more to the story. William and I exchanged panicked glances. But, Dorothy continued, her voice softening, I also know that I haven't seen you this happy since before your parents' divorce. I know that you look at this young man like he hung the moon, even when you think no one's watching. And I know that he looks at you like you're the answer to a question he didn't even know he was asking. My throat tightened. Grandma, so before you tell me whatever truth you think I need to hear, let me ask you this. What's real and what isn't? The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 3 weeks' worth of lies, and the growing realization that somewhere along the way, those lies had started becoming truth. The engagement is fake, I finally whispered, unable to meet her eyes. William needed a temporary wife to make his dying grandmother happy, and I needed money for your surgery and to save the clinic. Dorothy nodded like this wasn't a surprise. And what? And what about the rest of it? The way you two move around each other like you're dancing to music only you can hear. The way he defended you to his mother like you were the most precious thing in his world. William cleared his throat. Mrs. Anderson, I want you to know that I would never hurt Bia. This arrangement has been life-changing, I finished quietly, finally looking at him. It's been life-changing. For both of us, William agreed, his green eyes holding mine. I thought I was hiring an actress, but I ended up finding what? Dorothy prompted gently. Everything, he said simply. Everything I didn't know I was missing. My heart stopped beating entirely. In the morning light streaming through the dining room windows with Napoleon snoring softly at our feet, and my grandmother watching us with knowing eyes, William had just said the thing I'd been afraid to even think. "Oh, honey," Dorothy said softly, and I realized there were tears in her eyes. "You two are in love." "It's complicated," I protested weakly. "The best things usually are." Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. "Bea, darling, I've been married, divorced, widowed, and everything in between. I know the difference between acting and feeling. You two stopped acting weeks ago." William was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Bea." Before I could answer, my phone rang again. "Mom." Again. This time, William handed it to me without hesitation. "Answer it," he said quietly. "We'll figure it out together." I took the phone with shaking hands and answered. "Hi, Mom." "Beatrice Hope Anderson." My mother's voice could have shattered windows. "What in the Sam Hill is going on? I just got the most bizarre message from some woman claiming to be planning your wedding to someone named William Blackwood." "Mom, I can explain." "You better explain, young lady. Since when are you engaged? Since when are you dating anyone? And since when do you know people who have assistants calling about wedding planning?" I closed my eyes. "It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Now." I looked at William, who nodded encouragingly, and Dorothy, who squeezed my hand supportively. "I'm fake engaged to a billionaire to help his dying grandmother. But I think I accidentally fell in love with him for real. And now his mother is trying to destroy us, and Napoleon got drunk at our engagement party and attacked a $5,000 cake." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom?" "Honey," my mother said finally, "you're going to need to start from the beginning and speak slowly because I think I'm having a stroke." An hour later, after the most surreal phone conversation of my life, during which my mother went through shock, disbelief, anger, concern, and finally grudging admiration for my creative problem-solving, I hung up the phone feeling like I'd just survived a natural disaster. "How bad?" William asked. "She wants to meet you, in person, tomorrow." I rubbed my temples. "She's flying out with my dad. They want to assess the situation." "Define assess." "My mother is a forensic accountant, and my father is a retired detective. They're going to investigate you like you're a tax fraud case crossed with a murder suspect." William actually smiled. "Bring it on. I've got nothing to hide anymore." "What do you mean?" He stood up and paced to the window, looking out at the garden where Napoleon had terrorized so many innocent plants. "I mean that I'm tired of pretending this is just business. I'm tired of acting like what's happening between us isn't real." My heart started doing that acrobatic thing again. "William, I'm in love with you, Bea." He turned from the window, and the vulnerability in his expression took my breath away. "I'm completely, desperately, inconveniently in love with you. You and your drunk dog and your fierce grandmother and your terrible morning hair and the way you sing to scared animals when you think no one's listening." Dorothy made a small sound of approval from her chair. "This wasn't supposed to happen," I whispered. "The best things never are," he replied, echoing my grandmother's words. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Before I could answer, Eleanor's voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. "William, dear, could you come up here, please? I'd like to speak with you and Beatrice." We found Eleanor in her sitting room, dressed in an elegant robe and looking far more alert than someone who was supposed to be dying should look. "Sit down, children," she said with a smile that reminded me suspiciously of Dorothy's knowing expression. "We need to talk." William and I perched nervously on the edge of the sofa. "First," Eleanor began, "I owe you both an apology." "Grandmother, you don't need to apologize for anything." "Oh, but I do." Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. "I need to apologize for the deception." My blood turned to ice. "Deception?" "I'm not dying, dear. Haven't been for quite some time, actually. The doctors gave me a clean bill of health 6 months ago." The room spun around me. But William said, William said what the doctors told him 3 months ago when my prognosis was still uncertain. Eleanor looked at her grandson with gentle amusement. I've been meaning to update him, but then this delightful charade began, and I was having so much fun watching you two fall in love that I couldn't bear to interrupt. You've known? William's voice was barely above a whisper. Known? Darling, I suspected from the moment you introduced her. You've never brought a woman home in your life, and suddenly you're engaged to a veterinarian with a drunk dog. Please. Eleanor laughed. But then I watched you together and I realized something wonderful was happening. I felt like I might faint. So this was all for nothing? Nothing? Eleanor stood up with more energy than I'd seen from her since we'd arrived. My dear girl, this was for everything. William, you've spent your entire adult life convinced you were incapable of real love. And Beatrice, you've been so busy taking care of everyone else that you forgot to let someone take care of you. She moved to stand in front of us, her expression radiant with joy. You two gave each other the greatest gift possible. You showed each other what love actually looks like. Messy, complicated, inconvenient, and absolutely perfect. William was staring at his grandmother like she'd performed magic. You're really okay? I'm better than okay, darling. I'm planning to dance at your real wedding. Real wedding? I squeaked. Eleanor winked. Well, you can hardly stay fake engaged forever. What would people say? From somewhere in the house, Napoleon let out a triumphant bark, as if she approved of this turn of events. William turned to me, his eyes bright with possibility. So, Beatrice Hope Anderson, now that we've established that we're both terrible at pretending and excellent at falling in love, what do you say we make this real? I looked at this man who'd walked into my clinic 3 weeks ago and turned my entire world upside down. This man who'd defended me to his mother, who'd caught me when I fell, who'd made me believe in fairy tales again. I say, I replied, reaching up to cup his face in my hands, that Napoleon is going to need a bigger costume closet for the real wedding. His laugh was pure joy as he kissed me, and somewhere in the background I could hear Eleanor clapping and Dorothy crying happy tears, and Napoleon barking her approval of this completely ridiculous, absolutely perfect turn of events. After 3 weeks of pretending to be in love, the real thing was even better than we'd imagined. 1 year later, the sound of barking echoed through the newly renovated Brooklyn Animal Clinic as I chased a particularly energetic golden retriever puppy around the waiting room. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago I was struggling to keep one small clinic afloat, and now I was managing 3 locations while trying to catch an escape artist named Houdini. Need backup? William's amused voice came from the doorway, where he stood holding 2 coffee cups and wearing jeans that still looked suspiciously expensive, even though he'd been making an effort to dress down for clinic visits. Always, I panted, finally cornering Houdini near the reception desk. Though I'm starting to think Napoleon gave him lessons in chaos management. Speaking of Napoleon, she was currently holding court in the corner of the waiting room, wearing a tiny white coat that proclaimed her chief morale officer and supervising the other animals with the authority of someone who'd once single-handedly destroyed a country club engagement party. Dr. Blackwood, called Jenny, our newest vet tech. Your 11 o'clock is here, and she specifically requested the famous dog whisperer. I still got a little thrill every time someone called me doctor. Blackwood. We'd been married for 6 months now, and I was slowly getting used to sharing a name with the man who'd revolutionized my life by walking into my clinic with a fake cat emergency. The famous dog whisperer, William repeated with a grin, settling into the chair behind the reception desk like he belonged there, which after spending most of his free time at the clinic, he basically did. That's my wife. Your wife who still can't believe you gave up a corner office in Manhattan to help me chase runaway puppies, I said, handing Houdini off to his relieved owner. Best career change I ever made, William replied, and the way he said it, like he meant every word, still made my heart do little backflips. The transition hadn't been seamless, of course. William discovering that animals didn't respond to corporate negotiation tactics had provided months of entertainment. But watching him gentle a frightened rescue dog or patiently help an elderly man understand his cat's medication had shown me sides of him I never could have imagined during our fake engagement days. Besides, he added, pulling me down onto his lap despite the fact that we were in full view of the waiting room, someone has to make sure you actually take lunch breaks. I take lunch breaks. Granola bars eaten while standing over surgery notes don't count as lunch breaks. Before I could argue, the front door chimed, and Eleanor swept in wearing a bright purple tracksuit and sneakers, followed closely by Dorothy in a matching outfit. The two of them had become an unstoppable force since discovering their shared love of morning power walks and meddling in their grandchildren's lives. "Darlings," Eleanor called out cheerfully, "how's the empire building going?" "Eleanor, we've talked about this," I laughed. "It's not an empire, it's just 3 small clinics." 3 clinics, a mobile veterinary unit, a low-income pet assistance program, and a partnership with the city's animal rescue services, William listed proudly. "Sounds like an empire to me." "A good empire," Dorothy added, settling into her favorite chair. Yes, we'd gotten her a favorite chair at the clinic because she and Eleanor spent so much time here volunteering. The kind that helps people instead of just making money. "Though the money doesn't hurt," Eleanor said practically. "William, dear, how are the expansion plans for the 4th location coming along?" "We're looking at a space in Queens," William replied, his hand automatically moving to rest on my back in a gesture that had become second nature. "But someone insists we need to make sure we can staff it properly before we commit." "Someone is being responsible," I defended. "We can't help animals if we don't have qualified people to provide the care." "Which is why we're so proud of you both," Dorothy said warmly. "You've built something beautiful together." Napoleon chose that moment to bark imperiously from her corner throne, apparently demanding attention. "Yes, Napoleon, you've been very helpful too," I told her seriously. "Your quality control work on the new dog treats has been invaluable." "Quality control?" William snorted. "She ate half the inventory." "Research and development," Eleanor corrected. "Napoleon is a professional." As if to prove her point, Napoleon stood up, shook herself regally, and marched over to greet a nervous-looking rescue pit bull who just arrived with his new family. Within minutes, she had the much larger dog relaxed and playing gently, proving once again that size meant nothing when you had enough confidence. "She really is magic with other animals," Dorothy observed. "It's like she speaks their language." "She speaks the language of, 'I once destroyed a $5,000 cake and lived to tell about it,'" William said dryly. "That commands respect in any species." My phone buzzed with a text from my parents who were visiting from Oregon. "Flight lands at 6 p.m. Dad wants to know if William still has that wine he liked so much from last visit. Mom says don't cook. She's bringing casseroles. Your parents are coming for dinner tonight," I told William, showing him the message. "I love your parents," he said, and meant it. After their initial shock and thorough investigation of his character, financial stability, and intentions, which had been both terrifying and hilarious, they'd embraced him wholeheartedly. Dad especially had been impressed by William's transition from corporate shark to person who actually cares about things other than profit margins. "They love you too," I replied, kissing his cheek. "Mom still can't believe you learned to make her secret mac and cheese recipe. It was a strategic investment in family relations. It was sweet. I can be sweet when properly motivated." Before I could respond to that loaded comment, Jenny appeared again with a clipboard and a grin. "Dr. Blackwood, there's a situation in exam room 2 that requires your unique expertise." "What kind of situation?" I asked suspiciously. "The kind where a client specifically requested the veterinarian who married a billionaire and has the famous party-crashing Pinscher, because they figured you'd understand their problem." William and I exchanged looks. "What's the problem?" he asked. "Well," Jenny's grin widened. "Apparently their cat has been sneaking champagne from dinner parties and staging elaborate escapes that involve multiple pieces of furniture and at least 1 chandelier." The waiting room went silent for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Napoleon," I said sternly, looking at our chief morale officer, "have you been giving lessons again?" Napoleon wagged her tail innocently, which fooled absolutely no one. "Come on," William said, standing and offering me his hand. Let's go meet our newest kindred spirits. As we walked toward exam room 2, Dorothy called out, "Don't forget dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. "We'll be there," I called back, then turned to William. "You know what I love most about our life?" "What?" "It's never boring." He stopped walking and pulled me into his arms right there in the hallway, kissing me with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he didn't care who saw. "Beatrice Hope Anderson Blackwood," he said against my lips. "Boring is the one thing we'll never be." From somewhere behind us came the sound of Napoleon's approving bark, followed by Eleanor's delighted laughter and Dorothy's contented sigh. And as we walked into exam room 2 to meet whatever delightful chaos awaited us, I couldn't help but think that falling in love with a billionaire's fake engagement had turned out to be the best mistake I'd ever made. After all, the best love stories always start with a little bit of pretending and end with more truth than you ever thought possible, even if they do involve a drunk Pinscher destroying a country club cake along the way. The end.